in this particular example, we have a gross selling price of $1.1 million. So interestingly enough, the IRS doesn't care about gross selling price. It's not an important number to them because they know that people have closing costs. They're only interested in the net selling price. Now, net doesn't mean after you pay off your mortgage, which is a big mistake that people make. It means net after closing costs. So, you know, in New York State, New York City, we have transfer taxes, we have legal fees, we have property disclosure credits, there's a brokerage commission, of course. So, on a typical $1.1 million sale, your closing costs could be $100,000. That's just as an example. It's probably pretty accurate, somewhere around.
Mm-hmm.
So, then you have a net sales price of $1 million, right? That's the important number. The gross price means nothing, so we always need to know what are your expected closing costs. So we base everything off $1 million, and then you have a mortgage payoff. In this particular case, I gave an example of $350,000. Mortgage payoffs in the 1031 arena are critical. It's very important to know whether there's a mortgage payoff or not. And then you have the walkaway dollar amount, a term that's familiar to most of you. With walkaway dollar, I always refer to it as the WAD or the Y. How much money? How much money am I walking away from the closing with, right? That's a very, very important number in 1031. So to do a 1031 transaction and pay no tax on your gain, and you're going to see here, we're not even talking about what the gain is. The gain here could be $100,000, the gain here could be $1 million. We don't know what this person paid for this property. We're not talking about gain. All I can tell you is, if you don't want to pay tax on your gain, whether your gain is 100 or $1 million, if you don't want to pay any tax, to do a complete 1031, this is what you need to do. So there's three things. So the first one is that you have a target purchase price. And your target purchase price is equal to your net sales price after expenses. It's very simple. It's not the gross price, it's the net price. And you have to purchase, and I have this written here, you must purchase one or more new properties that are used for investment or rental purposes. We've talked about that like now 4 times. For this target amount or more, purchase closing costs and adjustments may be included in this target purchase price. So that means that if you're going to buy something for $950 and not $50,000 in closing costs, it works because your closing cost is $50, your purchase price is $950. So the $1 million target price includes all your closing costs. Now, if you go to Florida, you don't have a lot of closing costs. You buy in New York, especially if you get mortgage financing, you're going to have substantial closing costs on the purchase. So it says here too, you can buy more than one property. You can buy 3 condos. You can buy 2 properties. You could sell a property for $5 million and buy 6 properties, right? The problem is that all 6 properties, however, have to meet this total, and they have to meet the timing requirements. Sometimes if you buy too many properties, you wind up getting stuck with one of them. Something goes wrong in one of the transactions, and you can't meet the time requirements. But my point here is you can buy more than one property. Very simple, very straightforward. And this is the target purchase price. The second thing that you have to do, however, is you need to take the walkaway dollar amount that you're getting, and you need to reinvest it all in your property. You can't put any money in your pocket. And how does that happen? How do you want to follow this? It happens all the time, and it's very easy. So let me tell you what clients do. They know that they have to buy for $1 million, but what they do is they get a mortgage of $500,000 on the new property, right? Which they can do easily, right? They get a mortgage of $500,000. They run afoul of rule number 2 because if they're getting a mortgage of $500,000, they're only using $500,000 from the sale, and the other $150,000 is used to pay off a mortgage on another property. They use it for tuition. They put it in their pockets. They buy another personal residence. They give it to their kids. They're going to run afoul of rule number 2. Because rule number 2 says they have to reinvest the full $650,000. And people don't understand that. That's why it's listed as a separate requirement here. Right? So they have to spend all $650,000, target price of $1 million. And by the way, let's say they buy 2 properties for $500,000. It doesn't matter which property they allocate the $650,000 to. So they could allocate $500,000 to one, buy that all cash, have $150,000 less for the other $500,000 property, and get a mortgage of $350,000 on that. That works, right? But think about this now. If you need to buy for $1 million and you've only got $650,000, how are you going to do it? There's only 2 ways to do it. One is you get a mortgage to $350,000 or more, or you have to take $350,000 cash out of your other investments, out of your pocket, and do it that way, right? So people that have high mortgages on their properties now that are doing 1031s, they don't really want mortgages because rates are so high. Commercial rates are 5-year adjustables at 8%, 9%, 10%. So they're kind of like, when they realize that they have to get another mortgage, and I don't know what they were thinking anyway. I mean, most people you think would realize that they're selling for $1 million and they're buying for $1 million and they're paying off a mortgage, where's the money going to come from? But most people think that if they're selling for 1.1 and they're only getting 650, they think they only have to buy something for 650. It's not true. They have to buy something for $1 million, right? That's the big difference. So you have the situation where the numbers are pretty straightforward. If you use this sheet, you're never going to run afoul of the rules. It's pretty black and white, and it's pretty straightforward. And then the third thing that you have to worry about are the timing requirements. So the timing requirements are very rigorous, no exceptions, except for one, which I'll describe to you. And the timing requirements are all based upon closing dates. I get this question all the time. Contract dates mean nothing to them. Contract date is completely irrelevant. They know that you can put a fake date in a contract. Contract dates mean nothing. It doesn't matter when you sign contracts, everything's based upon settlement dates, as they call them throughout the United States. In New York, we call them closing dates. And there are 2 time periods. They both start to run on the closing of the sale property. So when you go to that closing to sell your property, that's when the time period starts. Nothing starts before it. And there are 2 time periods. The first one is the closing date of the new property has to be within 180 days of the sale date. Now everybody says to me 6 months. It's not 6 months. 6 months is 162, 163 days. You cannot believe how many problems we have over the last 3 days because everybody procrastinates, everybody pushes. It's 180 days, calendar days, not business days. And then you have 45 days to identify what you're going to buy. So the identification thing is a little tricky, and it's kind of stupid. It shouldn't be a requirement at all. It just means that within the closing date of your property, you need to put in writing what you're going to buy. Now, if you're going to buy 1 out of 5 properties, you can put all 5 down. But ultimately, if you close on a property that's not on that list, it doesn't qualify for 1031 purposes, and you created a taxable transaction.
You gotta be specific on what you're buying, or you're just saying you're buying a
No,
house.
you've got to be very specific. You need an address, block and lot. For example, you can't give a condo complex in Florida and say, I'm buying a condo in this complex. It is insufficient. It's got to be very exact, very identical. People that buy farmland, they want a meets and bounds description. They don't want you saying you're buying 60 acres and then you buy 60 different acres. This timing requirement is what runs people into trouble. So, and you only have 45 days, which is not a lot of time. So that means that when you go to your closing, you pretty much have to know what you're going to do, right?
So is there like a limitation? I'm just trying to be, I'm being silly, but let's say if you print out 500 commercial properties in Queens County, is that okay to submit a CO list?
So that's a very good question. So you can list up to 3 properties without a problem.
Okay.
But if you list more than 3 properties, the total value of the properties that you're purchasing can't be more than double the sales price of what you're selling.
Oh my God.
So that means, in this particular case, you're selling for $1 million net. You can list 10 properties, but the total value, whatever that value is, right? Nobody really knows because you haven't bought them, right? Can't be more than $2 million. So you can't list 20 properties.
Yep, it's good to know.
You can change properties anytime within the 45 days. We get that all the time. People identify, they go, listen, I want to get rid of this one, I want to add this one. The only way to circumvent this rule is to perpetrate a fraud. But you're not going to get away with it because this is right on their checklist. It's identification. They're very rigorous, very, very direct. It's tough. If you don't identify, you have a problem. So that causes another issue. So in the residential markets where you're doing residential 1031s, it's one thing, but if you're selling a property in New York and you're buying a warehouse in Missouri or Kentucky or Florida, right? You think everything's fine, you identify, you sign a contract, then you find out you have an environmental problem. There's contamination, right? There used to be a gas station here 30 years ago, right? Or even worse, you find out it's a short sale. Or even worse, you find out that there's a part owner here that's a relative who doesn't agree to sell. The listing broker took the listing from somebody, signs it up, valid transaction, right? You start negotiating your contract, you identify the property, you find out
Do
2
title
months
search.
later, the seller doesn't own the whole property. Now you don't have a transaction, you just created a taxable transaction on your sale because you can't change your identification because the 45 days passed. So if you're gonna be buying, we tell people, if you're gonna buy commercial property, you need to make sure that you run your environmentals, you run a title report, and you know what you're doing way in advance. You cannot just go through the normal process and find out 60 days later you can't buy the property. In a normal transaction, you sign a contract, you find out you can't buy the property, you don't buy the property, right? Here you have a time problem. So you have to be very, very careful with timing. It becomes, and we get this all the time. People say, I can't buy the property I was gonna buy. You're gonna change. You can't change. You just can't do it.